Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are in business. Today we are discussing balance shafts and whether or not we should keep them in our engine build or not. Now, some people argue, ball sacks. Some people argue that Honda put them there for a reason and that they should stay in the engine. And those people are correct to a point. But when you're building an engine, let's be honest, you're probably not building it for comfort. You're building it for speed, power, acceleration, what have you. Now, it's a little cold in here. This bastard's tight. There we go. Okay. Now, as I was saying, the balance shafts in an H22, F20b, H23 VTEC, H23 non-VTEC, what have you, the balance shafts serve one purpose. And that purpose is to offset the rotation of the crankshaft. They're weighted and they're balanced to the mass, well, the reciprocating mass of that crankshaft spinning around. Now, sorry, see if I have one that isn't attached to anything. Sorry about that. Now, this is one of the balance shafts. This is the one off the exhaust side. The balance shafts are designed to produce the opposite wave as the crankshaft. Now, as you can tell, how is something this small going to produce a harmonic wave opposite of something that is this big? Oh shit, knocking my camera over. Okay, sorry about that. Now, the way they do that, put that back, is the balance shaft spins 4 times for every single rotation of the crankshaft. Now, just like sound waves, when you have 2 opposite competing sound waves, they will cancel each other out. That is the same science behind using a balance shaft. The only reason they're in the H22 is for driver and passenger comfort. Excuse me, I'm getting a new pair of gloves. Some people will say that the H22s are less reliable when they don't have a balance shaft in them because there's all kinds of excess vibration. The vibration that you're feeling is what would normally be, of course, cut out by the balance shaft. It still exists, whether they're in there or not, but you're not feeling it because of how the balance shaft is rotating in comparison to the crankshaft and how it's producing an opposite vibration wave the crankshaft is. Removing them is not going to make the engine any more unreliable. It's not going to produce bad fuel economy or anything like that. Bah. All it will do is free up some power, free up some weight. The balance shafts do not weigh anything, or do not weigh nothing rather. They do have some mass to them. But really what you're freeing up is reciprocating mass, because they're spinning. And they're spinning quite quickly, considering that each one of them is rotating 4 times for every rotation of the crankshaft. Sorry about that. I had to plug the camera in. Battery low. Okay, so as I was saying, for every rotation the crankshaft completes, the balance shafts, both of them, go 4. So they're spinning quite quickly. That's a lot of reciprocating mass. That's a lot of parasitic drag. I've seen anywhere from 3 to 5 horsepower. That doesn't seem like a lot. And really it isn't. You probably won't feel 3 to 5 horsepower in your butt dyno. What you will notice is the engine revving faster. It will sort of have the same effect as putting a lightened flywheel on your car will have. Of course, the lighter the flywheel, the more noticeable effect it's going to have. Before we get into that too much and how to do a balance shaft delete, whatever you want to call it, at home without having to buy one of the expensive kits, we'll get into a little bit of oil pumps themselves, because half of the work of the balance shaft delete is done in the oil pump. Of course, exhaust side balance shaft comes out here, intake side comes out there. Normally, if you were to buy a kit, which I would recommend doing if you are maybe you don't want to be so hands-on. I don't want to say mechanically disinclined, because if you're this far into an engine, you've already got a little bit of mechanical ability, or at least I hope you do. If you don't, you should probably just stop right now and take it to a professional. That being said, there are some differences between oil pumps. This is an H22 OBD2 oil pump. Now, the biggest way the easiest way you can tell is these mounting holes. These mounting holes are there for the crank sensor. An OBD1 engine, or in the case of an F20b, which is the one, this is the oil pump housing that came off my F20b. Those are OBD2B engines. The crank sensor for those is in the distributor. These oil filter housings, or oil pump housings rather, do not have the bolt holes to mount the crank position sensors. Now, you can use you can use an F20b oil pump on your swap. Rywire makes a harness, so you can use the OBD2B oil pump and the distributor that comes with an F20b. It's a fairly easy harness to hook up. Takes maybe a half hour. The hardest part is digging out the connection down by the water pump where the harnesses, or the harness for the crank sensor plugs in. Or the, you can either plug that in, just Rywire gives you enough wire to plug in the adapter. It'll be right about here if you're in the engine bay. They give you enough wire to plug it in down there, or you can try to split the crank sensor harness out of the loom and bring it up closer. Either or, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Doesn't really matter. Both works the same. That being said, I bought this housing used. It was cheap. Don't know how many miles are on it. I already took the guts out of it. I'm going to measure up and hopefully swap in the internals, the actual oil pump gears that came in the F20b oil pump. We'll find out if that's possible when I get that far. If not, I'll still use that one. It's not like it can't go back together. It's no big deal. Where was I? So, oil pumps. Doing the balance shaft eliminator kit at home using parts you can buy off the internet that aren't like made by 1320 or K-Sport or whoever makes the other kit. I'm forgetting it off the top of my head at the moment. It is possible. It's not too much harder than buying the kit yourself, but there are some things involved. The kits come with a plug that goes in this side. No big deal. You can buy a freeze plug. Fits right in there. It's a 40 millimeter freeze plug. They come with a nice CNC machined cover that goes over the intake side. So the camera's drifting a little bit here. Okay, it goes over the intake side. Well, it looks good, and like I said, I do, or I should tell people, if you don't want to do extra work, just get those. While you can do this for much cheaper than buying the kits are easier. So it's how you want to balance cost versus time savings. The hardest part and the most different from doing it yourself with store-bought parts than buying the kit is the bearing here. Now, this oil pump housing did not actually have a bearing in this hole. The bearing was part of the housing. I actually drilled it out. But some oil pumps, they actually have a press-fit bearing in there, which really isn't all that difficult. You can take a hacksaw, take the one end off, thread it through the hole of the bearing, put it back together, and then cut a notch in the bearing. And that will make it much easier to get that bearing out. Some people will heat it up, spend hours pounding on it. But once you once you cut that notch in there, then all you need is a couple of sockets and a bench vise, and you can just press it out. You don't even need to go to buy like an expensive hydraulic press or anything like that. Like I said, this did not come with, or this housing did not have a bearing in here. The housing itself was the bearing. It had oil reliefs, it had oil galleries already machined out. So I drilled that out. I drilled it out undersized, and then honed it to size so it would accept a 1-inch freeze plug. So what we have here on this side is a 40 millimeter hole and a 1-inch hole. And all we're going to do on the oil filter housing is plug those 2 holes up and tap these 2 holes out. There's actually another hole here. I already drilled and tapped that one out. Now, if you look online, some older guides will say tap these 2 holes 5/16/18, which is fine, and tap that hole 5/16/18. That's not going to work so well for this hole. It was actually on this pump, the hole was way too big for a 5/16 tap. Let me just check real quick. Even on the F20b, that would be too big for a 5/16 tap. While you could tap some threads into it, the threads would not be deep enough where I would trust that set screw, which is what we're using, to stay in the hole and to seal the hole up tight enough. So what I did was I already had a 1/8" NPT tap, and I mistakenly ordered an 1/8" NPT plug for the block. We'll get into that later. But so I already had the plug and I had the tap. So I drilled and tapped that hole out to 1/8" NPT and put a pipe plug in there and sealed it up with a little bit of Permatex gasket maker. I'm going to tap these 2 holes out to 5/16/18. Now I'm going to use a bottom tap. This is a bottom tap. You can tell this is a through tap, and the easiest way to tell is this one's got a point on it. This one doesn't. Now a through tap is designed to go all the way through and out the other end of a hole. A bottom tap is just the opposite. This is designed to go down into a hole and then stop inside the metal. The reason I'm using a bottom tap is the one hole, this one, doesn't go all the way through. This ring is in the way. So I'm going to use a bottom tap on that hole, and I'm going to use the same tap on this one. Even though this hole goes all the way through, we don't really need to go all the way through because the set screws we're using are only, this long. So there's no reason. Focus. There's no reason to tap through, an entire tap depth hole for a 3/8 set screw. A 3/8 deep set screw, not a 3/8 thread. So I'm going to go ahead and tap these 2 holes out. Like I said, this one is already, this one's already tapped. It's got a pipe plug in it. Now, some people may go, well, I don't have a tap handle, and I got you covered. What you can use, and I've actually done this on the job. I am a retired industrial mechanic, you can take, I'm sure you got one of these hanging around, you can take your drill, chalk up a tap like that, and set the clutch on your drill so that if it gets too tight, it'll start skipping on the clutch rather than busting the tap off in the hole. Because if you break a tap off in there, you're going to be very unhappy. And unless you have a mill and some carbide bits, you're going to have a hell of a time getting a tap back out of one of these holes. So actually, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll tap this hole with the bottom tap with the tap handle, and I'll do this hole with my drill and a through tap just chalked up on there. I'm probably not going to go all the way through. First, put a little bit of oil on there. Doesn't hurt to put in a little bit of oil on the tap. We're giving you the AVE. If you're familiar with the AVE channel, we're giving you the AVE top-down view. Now, aluminum is fairly easy to tap into. It is a soft metal, but you do want to use some oil when you do it. If you're tapping cast iron, of course, you don't use oil. You don't use oil on cast iron, but you do use oil on aluminum or steel. Now, if you're wondering, if you're not familiar with using hand tap, why every once in a while you back off. That's to break the chip off inside the hole. You're doing that to relieve pressure off of the tap, so you're not dragging a big chip of metal all the way around until you bottom the hole out. Now this is done. Like I said, this one's already, it's not a very deep hole, and this is a bottom tap, so the threads will stop before we go out the other side. Alright, you just do a little brake cleaner through that hole. Nice and cold. That's why I got the gloves on. So, hole's nice and threaded, cleaned out. Now, we're going to do this one with the drill. Not really sure how I'm going to handle that with the camera, so I might get it started off camera, just so I'm not hitting the camera with my shoulder or my elbow. So I also suggest making sure that the tap is spinning true in the drill. Okay, and running the drill on low. There's no reason to have the drill on high speed when you're trying to run a tap with it. So we'll set this this clutch. See how. See right there? You can hear the clutch slipping. Back it out. All I'm doing is going forward until the clutch starts slipping, then backing it out a little bit and going forward again. I have the clutch set at 15. I could probably go a little higher than that, but we're not in a hurry. Don't have a supervisor breathing down my neck going, how long is this going to take? Is this going to take all day? Which, you know, if you're in a union, the response would be, 10 minutes longer now that you asked, boss. When they come back in another 15 minutes to ask if you're done, and they say, are you done yet? How long is this going to take? And you go, half hour, because I got to go poop. So let's see how good we are in that hole right now. We're about 2/3 of the way done. Alright, you get the point. No need to go all the way through. That's plenty deep enough to put a set screw in it. Plug up the hole. Alright. So there we go. Cold hands and cold workshop. Some drilled out holes that we need to put some set screws on. Now, what you want to use to put these set screws in is up to you. You could either use some RTV sealant, but in this case, I'm going to use some Loctite since I find the right size Allen wrench. There we go. I'm going to use some Loctite on these threads because I don't plan on ever taking them apart, and the Loctite will seal it up and stop oil ingress and all that. It's not going to be as thick as you know, RTV sealant, but it'll do the job. Down. I am using a blue Loctite. There's no reason to use red in here. Well, I said I'm never going to take it apart. There's no need to put permanent thread sealant in there in the same vein. So we'll wipe off the extra. No need to let that float around on there. There we go. 2 holes plugged. That one and that one. Well, like I said, these are 5/16. Sorry, these are 5/16, 18 by 5/16. I thought they were 3/8, but they're 5/16. Not that it doesn't really matter. That's thread pitch, thread count, and of course the length of the set screw. A little bit more Loctite on that one. Screw her in. Wipe off the extra. We don't need that. Wipe off the extra. And we're done. So we've got these 3 holes plugged up now. And the oil pump, all we have to worry about at this point is this 40 millimeter hole and this 1-inch hole. So let's do the 40 millimeter one first. I might need a bigger piece of wood here. Not that it matters too much. Sorry, just mumbling to myself. You get old, you do that. Not that I'm that old, but I'm actually going to install these with some RTV sealant. You could use whatever flavor you prefer, whether it's you know, the minty green or the cherry red. If you just like the plain gray, Honda Bond will work. The right stuff. Whatever. We're just sealing out. We're sealing in engine oil. We're not, you know, trying to make a head gasket or anything out of it. No. Put a little bit of extra on, more than you need. Wipe off what comes out the other side. So, little RTV in there. We're going to put this plug in from the front, and most people do that for the sole reason that these plugs are designed, they're tapered, so that they come out one way. And I'm sure most of you would agree, sorry, let me move this into the camera a little bit. Most of you would agree that you would rather have one of these plugs, if they do come out, hopefully it won't, but if it does, you'd rather have it coming out this way, and hopefully not chewing up your timing belt and breaking it before you know that something happened, than falling into your engine. Either one is bad news bears, of course. One is far worse than the other one. So we got that plug on there, and now I can't find my dead blow hammer because my shop is a disaster. How hard is it to find a giant red hammer? Oh well. We'll just use the old persuader. Alright, let's try this again. It's a day later. I had some battery issues. Even though the camera was plugged in, it wasn't charging. The battery was totally shot. It was all swelled up. It's a little chilly out in the shop again. But at least it isn't -17, which is probably why I've been a little late on this videos. I've just been not wanting to come out to the shop and freeze my ass off. I don't know why I keep my gloves way over here. It's actually so cold out here, I might actually, right now I have my coal stove running, but I might actually start up my waste oil burner. So I let off. Last time the camera died, I was putting this 40 millimeter plug in. I started the camera back up, put this plug in, and the camera died again 30 seconds later, so it didn't even get me putting that in. But they're in. They're not going anywhere now. It's so cold out. Even the RTV sealant is taking a long time to set up. It's almost been 24 hours. So a recap Sorry, kick the camera stand. A recap. This plug in the oil pump housing, 40 millimeter. This plug in the oil pump housing, 1 inch. We have a 5/16 18 by 5/16 inch set screw here. Same thing here. And then the hole that's here, that hole is a 1/8 inch NPT plug. You can see where I used a little carbide bit here and gave myself a little bit more room to run the tap. So as far as the oil pump housing is concerned, we are done with capping the holes. For me though, the oil pump is not done because I have to put the internals back in it and check the clearances and everything to make sure they're still in spec. But we'll get to that later, probably when we're getting closer to actually assembling the block. It shouldn't be that far away, but it is. There is still some time before we get there. So I'm going to move this off to the side. And then that leaves us with the engine cradle. Damn, this thing's in the way. Alright, so the only thing we need to do with this, if you're already familiar with the kits that you can buy already, then you already know what needs to happen here. We're going to put a solid dowel here, a solid dowel here, another dowel pin here, and another one here. So 3 of them are the same size, this 2 and this 1. This one is a little larger. As you saw my video starting yesterday, I was pulling the last of the factory dowels out. All you really need to do there is clamp a pair of vice grips onto them, crush them down, and turn them. If you start, because you're smashing a little metal tube, if you start slipping, just crush it the other way and continue on. They'll come out, I promise. So what we're going to do today is we're going to put those dowels in. I'm probably going to need something to hammer on. I'm going to want to move this probably quite flammable foam mat that I like to work on. Kind of keep stuff from sliding around, because I'm going to be using a torch. And the only thing we're using the torch for is to warm the aluminum up. It's just a regular turbo torch. It's not anything fancy. But I already have the solid dowels in my freezer. Yes, I have a freezer in the garage. You can hear a whining in the background. That's my coal stove ramping up, so I don't freeze to death while I'm doing this. Coffee's already getting cold. That's fantastic. But I already have the pins in the freezer, so I'm just going to squirt a little oil in those holes. If I can find some. Here. Type doesn't really matter. Just want something thin. Some AMSOIL, MP. That'll work. There we go. Running out here. Alright, so a little bit of lube in the holes. Never hurt anybody. I'm going to go get my dowels real quick out of the freezer. piece of wood here. Yeah, that'll work. Prop underneath, so I have something to work against. I'm going to start with the biggest of the set. At the end of the video, I'll put all the part numbers in for these dowels and the set screws and the Dorman freeze plugs I used. The dowels came from Fastenal. If you live near a Fastenal location, a store, you can order them directly through them. You can also get them off the internet. But the first thing we're going to do is let's see, what hammer do I want to use. Kind of have this camera boom blocking the path to my hammers here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, when you're looking at the dowels, the larger tapered end, it's the black end, goes in the hole. Okay. Now, you can use a BFH on this if you want. This is only a 32 ouncer, but I might upgrade if this proves to be insufficient. Didn't even need to heat it up. Just a little bit of oil slid right in there. Of course they're cold, so that probably helped. But just for shits and giggles. Oh yeah, now we're cooking. Alright. Just for shits and giggles, we're going to spin this around. Burn off all my oil. Let's squirt some on the dowel. Tapered end down. Rest it in the hole. Two in. If you saw there in that video, when I started, the dowel cocked off a little bit to the side, and all you got to do is you give it a tap, tap, tappy. Straighten her out. So she goes in her home. Everybody's happy. Happy, happy, happy. Alright. A little bit of oil. Type of oil doesn't really matter too much here. Narrow end down. This one's being a little Almost there, and done. Alrighty. One more to go. See, we're almost done with the cradle. Or the girdle, if you want to call it that. Whatever. Tomato, tomato. And do the last hole. Alright, still on camera. We're good. That step is done with the do-it-yourself at-home balance shaft delete. So I'm gonna pause the video here and set up to do the block. That should be the easiest and fastest of the whole thing. So, all right, here we go. The last step of our balance shaft delete is, of course, tapping and plugging this hole. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put a little oil down in there. Now the tap we're using is a 1/4 inch NPT. That is applicable for newer OBD2 H22s, the F20b and H23 VTECs. Older F-series blocks, I think the F22 and the F23 would use a 1/4 or an 1/8 inch NPT, which is why I accidentally bought the wrong size, but I ended up using it in something else anyway. So it's all good. So if you have purchased socket sets, you've probably come across these and wondered what an 8-point socket was for. Well, it's a square drive. It's for square nuts that you can, or square nuts, bolts that you might come across. They also fit larger sized taps. This is a 7/16. This is a 7/16 square drive socket. Fits right on that. The tap fits right in that socket. No problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the tap in there. Going to get it started. Just going a little bit at a time. Back off. A little bit at a time. Back off. kind of blocking the camera here with my big gorilla hands, but alright, so at this point we are most of the way down the hole. It's hard to tell from this angle, but there is less than a 1/4 inch to go. I'm gonna have to be careful because if I tap too far down, it's gonna be a pain in the ass to get that tap back out. So I'm gonna just give her a few more turns. Back her off. A few more turns. Back her off. Alright, take her all the way out. Flashlight, so down in that hole. Move this out of the way so I don't put my head on it. Alrighty. I would show you guys, but yeah, not really a whole lot to see. That being said, not that I get paid for any of this, but if you're in the market for a small, fits in the palm of your hand, super bright flashlight, the Through Night TN12, you can't go wrong with that. It takes 18650 batteries. I use the rechargeable, and it is super bright. More than you'd need for any shop environment anyway, unless you're working in the dark and for some odd reason. But this thing is a light Canon. I think on high it's like 11 or 1200 lumens, and that's not a we'll jam 70 crappy LEDs in it and measure in the best possible situation how much light it puts out. That's actually what it puts out, and it is super impressive. Oh, so the last step, now that we're done bullshitting about my flashlight, is putting plug in. Now, gonna wonder how we're gonna put a plug in that hole without succumbing to the forces of gravity and falling right in the block. And since this is a brass plug, it's going to be kind of hard to get it back out of there. Well, luckily, in this case, it fits quite snug on a 1/4 inch Allen. But if it didn't, I'm not sure if you've realized that engine stands have this nifty feature that they roll over. Hooray! So, if you think you're going to have problems dropping your plug into the hole, just flip the engine over and, go up so you're not fighting gravity. Funny how that works. Going to spray out the chippies. Speaking of fighting gravity, tilt that to the side. Use my fancy pants camera and all right, so that's done. Done is done. I'm going to do a dry run of this plug. I'm not going to tighten it all the way down yet. I'm just going to make sure that it threads in nice. And feels a little rough in there. So maybe I'll run the tap through again. If you've already seen me thread a hole, so I'm going to pause the video here, run the tap in. There might be a little chip in there. The plug does go in, but it's a little tight. So. Alright, I got the hole cleaned up. I got some... No, that wasn't tight, that was just sitting in there. Got a little bit of blue Loctite on there. I did cut the plug down a little bit. If you order the kits to do this, they the plugs they come with are pre-cut, but it was just like the last two threads, because it'll block up that oil passage. But I'm going to tighten this down, and then I'm going to leave it sit, and that's it. That's the last step, is tightening that plug down, and then then it's engine assembly after that. So we'll leave it at that. It sounds like my son is waking up, so you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.